So
Let's see some. Hi, Kevin. Kevin, can you hear me? Somebody's.
I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you, Janet.
Okay, thank you.
I have my thing muted.
Hmm? Okay. Brian had accepted his, um, and I told him to go to his team's calendar and join in through there.
She didn't have that one yet.
Okay, so there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Kevin, can you hear us?
I can.
Good, good. Carol is in here. Pete is in here. Mr. Washington, Holly, we have Dale, so we'll begin the meeting. Did you get a copy of the agenda, Kevin?
I did.
Okay.
And I have everything copied out in front of me.
Okay, good. So we'll start with the construction manager contract. And Dale, we'll turn it over to you to walk us through the highlights of this.
All right. Some of this I've already covered in the work session, but basically, if you'll, the contract actually includes some exhibits that were sent to you at the work session that deal with general conditions and the guaranteed maximum price amendment. The key pieces, if you'll look at the timing, the first phase is the pre-construction phase. During this time, the construction manager and architect will work on the design and ultimately the bid documents to be produced. During the pre-construction phase, the construction manager receives 20% of his total fee. However, we have it broken down into 5 phases of pre-construction, and for each phase, actually it's 4 phases. For each phase, there has to be an agreement with the district to give the go-ahead notice of proceed before he can incur the cost of the additional 5%. So there's 5% for each phase of the pre-construction. There's a schematic phase, design development phase, construction development, and bid phase. Each one of those he gets 5%, but before he can go to any of those phases, he has to have a notice to proceed from the district.
Dale, excuse me, that's page 11, Article 5.
Yeah, that's right, 5.1.1.
Yeah.
And the fee is based off of a 3.45%. And right now we're just using an estimate contract value of $20 million. So the total fee would be $690,000. That includes $138,000 for the pre-construction component. But keep in mind that the construction manager fee will ultimately be adjusted based on what the guaranteed maximum price actually comes back at. And keep in mind we're plugging in these numbers on a budget basis only. No one knows what the cost is going to be until we finish the design and the construction manager bids out the project and we receive those bids back. And ultimately, the construction manager will send the district a document, a guaranteed maximum price document that will be a guaranteed not to exceed price, at which time the district can decide to proceed at that point or not proceed. So it doesn't, the district's not locked in until we know what the guaranteed maximum price is. And then we have some days to consider, 45 days to consider the guaranteed maximum price, at which time we could reject it or proceed. Then, unless the owner, which would be the district, approves any change in the scope of work or any change orders, the construction manager actually bears the risk of any excess over the guaranteed maximum price. So really, we're going to know when he does that guaranteed maximum price what the cost of this project is going to be, unless we make some changes after that guaranteed maximum price is accepted. Once we accept the guaranteed maximum price, construction is supposed to commence within 15 days. Substantial completion is within 18 months of commencement, and then occupancy within 30 days after substantial completion. There's a few other little important provisions. One is that the construction manager will have 100% payment and performance bonds. That cost will not be incurred until the district gives the go-ahead to incur those costs. Henson must comply with all competitive bidding requirements. He must also provide monthly progress reports to the board. And there's a penalty per day for failure to meet the substantial completion or occupancy requirements. There's also a termination provision in the event Madison County does not appropriate money for this construction. So there's those are really the highlights of the contract. There's a resolution that goes with this contract that I've prepared. And the reason I prepared that resolution is that some bonding companies will require a resolution at some point. So I figured let's go ahead and get that resolution in place now instead of coming back later. But that's pretty much the terms of the contract. There was one thing I'm checking to see if I've gotten a response back on. Yeah, and one provision that we're going to strike is paragraph 5.1.3. That puts a timeline on us to finish the pre-construction stage, and Henson Construction has agreed to strike that provision of the contract. So, does anybody have any questions about the contract?
Carol, questions? Any questions?
Not right now, probably not.
Okay. Okay. Kevin, questions? Question, I think you're on mute.
Damn. Okay, sorry, Jim. My question is something pertains to what you asked in the board meeting when we first started talking about this. So the board votes on this contract next board meeting, and we approve it. So the payments to the construction manager begins, correct?
No.
No.
Does not
No.
until the county commission actually funds it. Right?
That's right.
Okay.
We have this notice to proceed built in. So at each stage, before the construction manager incurs any cost, he has to have a notice to proceed from the district.
Okay.
Kevin, that's a real fundamental question. But again, if you look at page 11, Article 5, this thing's broken down even during pre-construction into 4 phases. And we really have to have funding in place before we proceed with each one of those pre-construction phases.
Okay. So this is just us getting to the point, then the county commission funds it, and then it begins, right?
That's right.
Okay.
And one thing that this allows the county commission to do, or the district to do, is to fund it on a piecemeal basis, because the county commission could give us money to fund the pre-construction phase, and we could go forward with the pre-construction phase between the construction manager and the architect, and then not fund the entire price of the project, because we're not really going to know the price of the project until the GMP comes in.
Right.
But I would point out one thing. I think Dale has done a good job of integrating this contract with the architect's contract. Is that right, Dale?
Yes.
And so these, if you look at Article 5, that's coordinated with the architect's contract. So each stage of the pre-construction, we get feedback from the CM on budget and also on schedule. And that keeps you from getting to the bid document phase, and then all of a sudden the bids come in and they're substantially over what you can afford. So this makes a lot of sense, Dale, the way you've got it set up. Okay, any other questions for Dale?
Yeah, I have a question. Why are we piecemeal? Are you suggesting that this is the way to go? Because we don't have the funding guaranteed.
Well, and that's a good reason to do it in a piecemeal fashion because we don't know what the county is going to do. The county may decide to fund up to a certain point, like up to the design and all the pre-construction, but they're not ready to fund the total project. So it allows us some flexibility to do it on a piecemeal basis. And it's just flexible for us. It doesn't really affect anything except it gives us some financial flexibility.
So we're just going on hope, I guess, right now as it relates to the funding, because I was under the impression, excuse me, that that's what we wanted to see, what the commission was going to do, or how much funding, if any funding. So right now, we don't have, like I said before, we don't have any guarantee at this juncture.
Now, I think Ray has had some discussion with the county commission, so.
Yeah, so where we are, yes, we're gonna piecemeal these phases, and it may be some time out before they can actually fund the total project. Not only did we have COVID intervene with some funding issues short-term that we gotta work through, but just some other issues with the county that we gotta work through as far as funding this project and even others in the future. So we're just gonna take it one step at a time. I've let Doug Stevenson, the budget director, the budget commissioner, know that. We'll take it one step at a time and ease into this so that at a point when we are ready to fund it, that we're prepared. So we can sit back and do nothing, and then a year from now, they say they can fund it, then we gotta go through this whole phase for a year to get to that point. Why not use this time while we're waiting on them to at least get to a point where we know what we wanna build and how we wanna build it, and then at the time, whenever that time might be that we can execute the plan, we're ready to execute it.
I hear what you're saying, but I still have some readiness on this. And I just want to, go ahead and get that out while we're in this committee meeting. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Any other questions then? Then, Mr. Chairman, I think what you would look for is a approval recommendation from this committee on the resolution. Is that correct? Okay. So do we have a motion to approve the resolution that would allow the chairman and our superintendent to move forward and execute this contract?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? I'll second it. Any other discussion on this?
Just one question.
Yeah.
So we are, just execute this contract. We'll still be waiting for the county commission to fund the project. But it gets us going on some stuff where they can fund it so we can not be a year out before we start.
That's absolutely correct. And the other thing it does, Kevin, we know we have a good estimate of what each one of these phases costs. So we know what we're asking them to fund with each phase.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
No,
Any opposed?
no.
Okay. All right. Motion carries. Dale, thank you.
All right.
Okay, we'll move on then to the second item, which is the May budget amendments. Holly, are you going to walk us through those?
I sure will. I'm going to attempt to share my screen to pull those up. Got them. Got them. Open. I'm just not.
Let's see. Do this. Let's minimize what you don't want. It's showing there.
Okay. So we have 5 budget amendments to present this month. The first one is insurance recovery for damages to Southside High School, $10,234. Second item is a $10,000 contribution for scholarships. Third item is $8,786. Maintenance department is transferring funding to be used for general maintenance and repair work. Item number 4 is $28,000. This is transferring funds from our diesel fuel account to cover additional legal fees that may be incurred through year end, as well as consulting services to be provided by the incoming superintendent. We probably will be presenting another budget amendment in June to add additional funding for legal fees. There have been some recent investigations to come up that may that we may need to cover. So we'll look at that and probably present another amendment in June. The last item is education capital. This amendment is appropriating the balance of our funding that's in our fund balance to cover projects that will occur this summer. We're also transferring money that we have left in our land account into building improvements to help with this. So I'm going to move over to the actual budget amendment. You can see at the bottom of the amendment the detail as to what those funds will be spent on.
Questions for Holly? Holly or Ray, I guess I had a couple on the capital piece. First of all, does this take our fund balance in capital down to zero or?
Not exactly zero. I left about $10,000 in it.
That's pretty close to
In the grand scheme of things.
That's pretty close to zero. Okay. And let me ask, these numbers I see here, are they hard estimates? Or are they just budgets? Or is this work been bid out yet?
Yeah.
Those are hard. They're hard numbers in part. Item number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5.
5.
Mhm. The rest of those are estimates. And then there are some items listed that we don't have estimates for yet, that they're pending availability of funding.
So if we have any funds left over, those are the projects that we would use them for.
So on items 1 through 5, have they already been bid out?
Yes, they've been bid out.
Okay, so,
Yes.
and you think you can get all that done this summer?
Yeah, it's in process now by us having an early start. Many
Okay.
projects are underway already, like Northside Roof. I got pictures of it today. I think some of the parking lots have been already started and some other things. So many of them already started. And if you take the locker rooms at West Beams and JCT, even if that carries over into the year, I don't think it impacts school because it won't impact students if they're working on it.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So yeah, we got a lot of projects, a lot to do, but we're ambitious as usual, and we run to the end, and we've had a good track record of getting them all done in time.
Okay. All right, do we have a motion to approve these amendments?
So moved.
Motion from Kevin, do we have a second? I'll second it. Any other discussion on these? Any other questions? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So we'll move into the FY21 budget. Is that you also, Holly?
That is me. I'm going to pull up. This way. I'm going to pull up the executive budget summary and we can run through that. Okay. I guess just to say a few words before we get started, we've been working through this budget process for several months now with input from our district staff as well as the principals. And so, and input from the school board as well. So we've pulled all of those requests together, reviewed all of those, made decisions based on those requests, and we have those put into these budget documents. And as it stands, you can see this is a summary of all of our funds, revenues and expenditures, and ending fund balance. And these are tentative proposed pending input from this budget committee and the board. So for next year, you'll see that we're anticipating our beginning fund balance to be about 13.6 million. Our total revenues at 103 million. Total expenditures 109.5, with a net loss of 6.3 million, ending our fund balance at 7.3 million. Now that's the budgeted revenues and expenditures as compared to the proposed actual expenditures and revenue, and we'll get to that in a minute. Fund 142, 143, and Education Capital 177 are also listed there.
Holly, do you want us to ask questions as we go along, or just let you go through the whole presentation?
That would be great.
Ask questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Questions for Holly then on this overview of the budget?
I don't have any.
Holly, Carol, have you got any? Okay. Holly, I guess two questions. Is it true that traditionally or historically we've come in at roughly 97% of budgeted expenses? Is that kind of a rough rule of thumb? So if we look at this budget we're looking at here and we came in at 97%, we're still looking at a deficit of a little over $3 million.
That's
Real,
right.
I mean, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And in my projections that I show, I'll go ahead and move to that. I did not use the 97%, but I took an average of our prior two actual years. We had one year that came in at 96.7 and then one at 96.6. So I just took an average of that and applied it. And so you can see here what that does. It brings us to a net loss of 2.6 million.
Okay. Is this on page 4 now? Is that what you were looking at?
Yes.
So the $1,500,791 in expenditures, Holly, again, that's an average of the percent of budget that we've been coming in. Is that what you're saying?
For the last 2 years.
Last two.
Yes, I didn't include where we think we're coming in this year because it's an extraordinary year with the COVID-19 situation, and it looks like we're coming in. You can see there estimated for fiscal year 20 at 95.4%.
Yeah, you're right though. I don't know how you get apples to apples on that. Holly, if we look at FY20, and please, if I'm off, I hope you tell me, but I've been watching that very closely prior to the shutdown. It looked like to me we were trending toward a deficit of between, I don't know, 1.1, $1.2 million. Is that, I mean, I'm talking about a real deficit in that book. Would you agree with that, or am I being too pessimistic or too optimistic? Or
That's about on target. I believe that's what I was showing in my monthly financial reports.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay. While we're on the fund history and forecast, we can go ahead and I'll explain what I've done as far as future years in building this forecast. You can see that I've added a $1 million increase in BEP funds each year. It looks like, based on our April estimate this year, that we may get funding at about $711,000 over last year. We'll see where that falls out, but we'll continue to get estimates monthly until we get our July final estimate in July.
Okay. Any questions so far then? Holly, do we want to look at page 3 and kind of walk through? Is this an overview of the changes in the budget?
It is. It is. It's just some of the highlights. It, of course, is not everything. And I'll be glad to walk through each of these, and we can talk about them. If you have any questions, feel free. First item is the BEP funds are estimated to increase by $711,000. We're still unsure regarding the funding from the county, but when I prepared this document, we're anticipating a reduction based on our declining ADM. And so I've built that into the budget, and that would be a reduction to local taxes of $472,000. And that will keep the county funding at the minimum allowable level, which is maintenance of effort.
So Holly, that would be based on a reduction of what in the ADM?
About 118 students.
118 at, and then what's the dollar value?
$472,000. $4,002 each.
$4,002 each.
Right.
Times 118 gives you that number. Okay. And you agree with those numbers that we have declined? I know that ADM is kind of a moving target, but you agree, right? You agree with that?
Yeah, that's what it shows. That's the number that it shows. So that's what we have to work off for right now.
All right.
118 is the number.
That's based on an average weighted ADM of reporting months 2, 3, 7, 6, and 7. And so the state had those numbers when they sent us the April BEP estimates. And so that's where we got that ADM.
Okay.
2019.
1920.
2019 numbers.
No, current year numbers.
1920, school year 1920. Yeah, they take month 2, another couple of increments in month 6. So month 6 ended in year 20, but still fiscal year 2019 for school. So this year. Yeah,
Okay,
this year.
okay.
Yeah, this school year. Yes, sir.
Wow.
The ADM for this school year will determine our funding for next school year.
Right.
Can, any other questions on this? This is a pretty informative page here. Any other questions on page 3? Because I have a couple I wanted to ask, but I wanted to. Kevin, have you got any?
No, I do not.
Carol, have you got any on? No. Okay. Yeah, let me ask just in general, but let me just say in general, it concerns me when we're looking at a budget that likely is going to be between negative 2.6 and $3.1 million. I mean, even after adjusting for what we historically pick up on our expenditures, we're still looking at something that big. My first question is, do we assume everything else in the budget is pretty constant from FY20 going into 21? Or are there any other significant changes?
Yeah, we worked through that, and yeah, we're looking at most things will be constant. Of course, our biggest variable is always wages. I mean, that's 80 to 85% of our budget. So our budget is driven by wages and salaries and benefits. So we go through each line with each department, and especially with schools as to staffing needs based on student enrollment and student needs. So as you look down, you see we have several student needs, primarily around special ed, pre-K, ESL, where we have to make sure we maintain the proper ratios and keep things in line in order to stay compliant. So if you look at the spots that have been added within the budget, the positions, those positions support ideas and things that we have to do. So that's where we are. So we had a decline in ADMs, but we have a need to add these specific types of teachers because of the ratios. As we continue to see our population shift and the needs of our population shift, we still have to do what we have to do to service them.
So let me make sure, Ray, what I think I heard you said, all these positions were added. They're not discretionary. We are required to have these.
Yeah, so well, I'll give you an example. So you see the SPED assistants and teachers for pre-K that we had to add up our budget. The 3 consulting teachers, we have schools who by state staffing method don't rate assistant principals. So we fill those gaps with consulting teachers because the requirements for evaluations, the requirements for IEP meetings, the requirements for other things continue to grow. So a single principal in a building cannot perform all those tasks by him or herself. So instead of adding a assistant principal, we use the position of consulting teacher to assist in those matters. So we've had schools that don't rate elementary principals that we fill that gap with. The one assistant principal that you see is, you'll see at the bottom where our academic coordinator was deleted. That academic coordinator was moved to assistant principal. They attained the credentials to do that, and that school went over the amount of ADMs needed to rate an assistant principal. So we had a school who at one time didn't have enough students to rate an assistant principal. Now they do, and we just converted that academic coordinator to the assistant principal. The crossing guard is at East Elementary on New Deal Road. We have one on Ashport Road, but we did some configuration to move the traffic off of Ashport Road, which had been a community hazard. And now we have routed the buses around to New Deal Road, so we need a crossing guard back there. So those are the type of things that are out there. You see school counselors, which is a big number. Many of our schools, by our funding formula and the way we're funded by the state, need or rate counselors, which are greatly needed within our schools for many, many purposes. So that is the biggest addition, is the addition of counselors, which are needed in our schools.
I guess, Ray, my concern is And I don't know how the board's gonna look at it. My concern is though, we're looking at, let's just say nominally a $3 million deficit.
Yep.
In terms of sustainability, what does FY 22 look like?
Yeah, on the previous sheet, Holly had laid out through 24, I believe, where we would land based on her forecast, notwithstanding where we came in on the expenditure side, and it took us out to 24. So really through 23, we could sustain this, but at some point, some changes would have to be made, either from a revenue side or an expenditure side over the next couple of years.
Does this budget, we put in place the new curriculum for really all 4 major subjects,
Yes,
K
sir.
through 12.
Yes, sir.
Does this budget include all the updates we need
Yes.
to keep that curriculum current?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, Kevin, Carol, questions?
I don't have any.
Mr. Chairman, do you have questions?
That page right after, things we just discussed, page right after it. 4, 5. You put it up again.
4, 5,
Yeah.
this page.
This is one,
If we're finished with the general purpose fund, I'll be glad to kind of go through the highlights of the federal projects fund.
That, you just included the care, stimulus care money as a total, right? The dollars we received,
Well,
and I guess you listed the allowable use of the funds, right?
I did. I put a note on the summary regarding this grant. However, it is not in the proposed budget that will be presented next week. And that's because we just don't have enough information at this point to know how to budget it. We have a webinar on May 18th, and then the application opens on May 26th. It closes on June 15th, and then the tentative award date is June 30th. And so we'll be meeting here to discuss, and we've already had one meeting, to talk about how those funds should be used and how we want to apply for those funds. And we'll be coming back to the board in August with a budget amendment to add that funding. That's the plan.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, we have some discussion after we find out
mhm.
the possible use of funds. We can have a discussion about where the dollars go in most needed.
Right. We do know generally acceptable uses of those funds, and that's what I've listed here in this document. So you can see, can be used for planning for long-term school closures, purchasing education technology, providing mental health services, in addition to other items.
So you understand, Jim, those dollars are not adding to the budget, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And it is federal funding, and so we cannot supplant with this funding. We have to be careful that we adhere to the guidelines of the grant and not use it to provide services that the district should be providing. It's supplemental.
Yeah,
And
this
it's
is a totally different budget.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this
Yes.
is directly geared to student services, right? That's-
I wouldn't say only that, but that's included in the allowable expenditures.
One last question on the, federal dollars, $1 million we received for Arlington, Adams Lane, Lincoln, and JCG. Listed uses, are those the only uses? One of my concerns is that our priority schools, especially kindergarten, first grade, teachers don't have aides. I think one of the things that we've been struggling with development in those schools, in the grade stuff. And I think, parent with the teacher-student ratio, we're not gonna move the needle academic testing until we get specific in those lower grades. That's not a final list of uses for those funds.
Yes.
It is.
Let me see if I can find, we will have educational assistance funded out of the priority school grant at the schools. See if I can find that.
Okay.
They get assistance.
Yeah, Ruth sent that yesterday. I'm not sure I can put my hands on it right now, but there are positions within the grant at those 4 schools, specifically behavioral assistants, and I believe an interventionist.
Okay.
The items to note in the food service fund are the bonuses that are built into the budget. 1 position at central office being eliminated. And then the highlight that all students continue to receive breakfast and lunch meals at no cost. Then moving on to the education capital fund. You'll see that we have 10 regular education buses and 4 special ed buses in our proposal, totaling $1.3 million. We also have funds set aside in the current year budget that for the Workforce Development Center. We're moving that into the budget for next year. We've started with the engineering services on that, but we won't encumber the actual project until after July 1st. So we're moving those funds into the original budget for next year so that we can get started shortly after July on that. Then other items that are included in the budget for next year would include playground equipment and repairs, HVAC replacements, roof replacements, and then furniture, cameras, alarm systems, and all the items that are needed for the new JCM High School and the Madison Academic High School. And this is pending funding from the county. We've not been told whether or not we will have bond proceeds to cover these expenditures next year. I have been told to go ahead and plan on, although it's not been voted on. I've built the budget as if we'll receive the same level of local taxes that we did this year, which is right at $2 million.
Question for Holly or Ray on this.
I don't have any.
Ray, have you gotten any indication of, because if you got any indication of what level of funding we might be looking at?
No, I haven't. I spoke to Mr. Commissioner Stevenson about this, and he was still a little up in the air and waiting for some numbers to come in. We have our budget meeting with them on next Thursday, and maybe by then we have a better read. But at the time I spoke to him last week, he really just didn't know. Local taxes are about 2 months behind all the time, and we know that they're going to be less, of course, than in previous years. So we just have to wait and see. I think the property tax numbers will be fine, but local taxes will take a hit, and we just don't know how much yet.
Ray, I think I recall that this last item, the JCM in Madison, was dependent on contingency, roughly $5 million for those items. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the estimate to make sure we outfit those schools where we would like to with furniture, cameras, alarm system, and other technology infrastructure. That's one thing that's out there. That's, if it's the first thing off the list, that's what I would choose to make sure that we take care of first, along with buses. Those are the two things that we really need to do, because several years ago we got behind on bus purchases, and we're playing catch up for I think at least 2 more years on buses, because as you know, at 15 years, it's out of its useful life, and we have to sideline them, and we can apply for a waiver for 3 more years. But at that point, you can't use them anymore. So we do have to move forward if we can on buses. And then second to that would be the JCM early college, or JCM and Madison infrastructure equipment.
Ray, have you got on these other items up here, have you got a rough budget for those? The HVAC and the roof and the playground?
Yeah, we do have, Alan has that. We have that, like the roof replacement at JCT, I think is under $400,000. We're starting to catch those earlier. So we're not in the situation we were a few years ago. It's out of warranty. We do have several leaks in that roof. We replaced the tiles often, and we did some patchwork on it last year, but it'd be better if we go ahead and replace it. The roof is, I think, 16 or 17 years old at this point, and it needs replacing. So that's where we are with that, but it's not nearly as expensive as if we let it go for another few years. Then we jump up to the $500,000 $1 million range that we've been running into with the older buildings.
And HVAC at Northside, what is that of?
Yes, one of those buildings still has an antiquated HVAC system that's costing us more in repair than replace. That's what we've been going through. So if we can replace it, we should replace it. But that's one of the things, if I can push back, that I would, just because we can limp along a little while longer if we can't get funding for it. But we really do need to replace it.
It sounds like, though, if we could get to 10 million, we might could do everything on this list. Is that right?
Yes, for sure. If we got that much, we could. But
okay.
Once again, I continue to have conversations with Mr. Stevenson, and I try to work through the process as we have the last several years to work with them, to work with us to get these things done. I hope and they trust that we're not doing things that don't need to be done. Everything we ask for, we absolutely need. It's just a matter of prioritizing and reprioritizing throughout every year.
Okay. Okay, questions for either Holly or Ray on the capital budget?
I don't have any.
Let me say this to the committee and to Pete. I'm personally not ready to recommend approval of this till I understand it. I'm really just now saying it. And particularly, Ray, I'm concerned with these projections going forward. And, sustainability is a big thing to me. And we on a trajectory of a sustainable budget. And when I look at what I'm looking at right here, I'm concerned that we're not. So personally, I'd like to maybe get up some questions for you and Holly where I can better understand these projections a little bit more. But if the rest of the committee is ready to move approval of this, I would entertain that motion.
I have already.
I'm sorry. Okay, Carol's not ready. Kevin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think let's make sure everybody's questions are answered first.
Okay. Ray, it's all right. I'd like to get some questions up for Holly. I want to make sure we understand as a committee this forecast out here and what the assumptions are built into that. And
Sure.
because okay.
Yep.
Let's see. Holly, Ray, do we have anything else to bring before the committee then? Holly, anything else?
Maybe just talk about the timeline for when those questions may come. Just want to make sure that we're providing the county with a proposed budget plan by their deadline.
That's a great point. I can get my questions to you tomorrow,
Okay.
and I think they're fairly straightforward. And then we would. I would still say, as Mr. Chairman, being ready to talk about this in detail at the work session and then vote on it at the board meeting. So yeah, I just want to make sure I understand the projections, and it does concern me when we're looking at something that shows deficits this size, just one after another. Sooner or later, we're going to have to address that. And I just want to make sure we thought through that as an organization before we move forward.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Is it possible that, board members get a copy of that?
Cover individually.
Sure, you're talking about the projection? I can't hear.
Yes, sir, the projection.
Yeah. Are you okay with that, Holly?
I'm okay, just knowing though that the projections will change based on information that I may receive from the county today or tomorrow.
Sure.
There were still some uncertainties that may greatly impact where we're at. So I can send what I have now, but Monday it may look a little different.
Okay.
And even the state's money to us is still being firmed up. That will change over the next 2 or 3 months, won't it, Holly?
Yes, we'll get an updated estimate at the end of this month, at the end of May, and again in June, and then July final.
Okay.
Pete, let me just say one thing. After trying to chair this with these things, my hat's off to you for what you do. You make it look a lot easier than I make.
It gets a little busy, I'll tell you that.
You make it look easy. Okay, anything else to bring before the committee then? Then we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.
See y'all later.